with indie hotels and these roadside revitalizations, I think the sky's the limit, and it really just comes down to the owner and the team behind it and what they're capable of. And that's the thing that really excites me. And I think there's a big opportunity there.
Welcome to the second season of The Modern Hotelier, the fastest growing hospitality podcast. Both hosts were named top 100 most powerful people in hospitality and voted fourth most popular podcast by the International Hospitality Institute. Each episode will get to know an industry expert and we'll discuss the latest trends in hospitality to help you, the modern hotelier. Welcome to the Modern Hotelier. I'm your host, David Malilly.
I'm your co-host, Steve Karen.
And I'm the producer, John Boomhofer.
This episode is sponsored by Longitude Branding. Are you opening a new hotel and needing a brand that really stands out? Longitude could be the branding and design partner you need. Since 2010, they've worked alongside many of the most iconic hotel brands and countless independent boutique hotels of all shapes and sizes. Whether you're constructing a new hotel from the ground up or renovating and repositioning an existing asset, Longitude is your guide for building a brand that lasts. From developing the vision and positioning strategy, to creating a brand name and identity, to designing interiors that wow guests, Longitude aims to help its clients create more memorable, engaging, and impactful guest experiences. Reach out with your next project by visiting longitudebranding.com.
Steve, who do we have on the program today?
Yes, David. Today we have on Jeremy Wells. Jeremy is a partner at Longitude, a hospitality branding and design agency founded in 2010. He's also a co-founder and partner at Flyover Developments, a hospitality investment and development group. And as an owner and alongside with partners, Jeremy actually helps spearhead the repositioning, design, and renovation of the Ozark Lodge, Branson, Missouri's first modern independent hotel experience, which actually launched this past summer in 2023. He also has written 2 books in the hospitality space. One that is called Indie Hotel, just released on September 12th. Welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Thank you guys for having me. Excited to be here.
Thanks, Jeremy. So we're going to go through 3 sections. We're going to get to know you a little bit better, talk about your career, and then get into the industry. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, so here we go. So what was the worst job you've ever had?
Probably my worst job was I was a busboy at CC's Pizza, if you guys are familiar with that. That was like my first job in high school, and it was just a mess, like cleaning up after people after they're eating a pizza buffet. It sounds as bad as it was, so that was probably my worst.
All right, so are you a morning or a night person?
I've become a morning person. I think I was in my younger years was an evening person, a night owl, but kind of had to turn into a morning person more recently over the last few years. So,
got it. All right. So, if you had to delete all the apps off your phone except for 3, what 3 apps would you keep on your phone?
Yeah, I would definitely keep the camera app. I love taking photos of just business and my kids and all of that. And then I would keep the Spotify app. I love music and podcasts. And probably LinkedIn. Most of my social media is through that platform, so like to stay in touch with colleagues and friends.
What's the emoji you use the most on your phone?
I find myself asking people for favors a lot, so it's usually like the please, like thank you type thing. So that's probably the one I use the most. But
that's funny. Well, what's your favorite song? One song you can listen to.
Oh man, that's a tough one.
You can pick a band too if you want, or a singer.
Yeah, I don't know. I love 90s music and like early 2000s. So probably something like by Third Eye Blind or Death Cab for Cutie or something like that. So those are good bands.
Cool. Do you have a favorite restaurant?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Oh, there's a local restaurant here in Springfield, Missouri, where I'm based, called The Wheelhouse, and they just have excellent food and drinks. And my wife and I go there almost every single date night. So that's probably my favorite.
So if you had your own talk show, who would your first guest be? They can be dead or alive.
Oh man, that's a tough question. Yeah, I don't know. That's a difficult one. I'd have to think about that. It'd probably be some like old president or something, or like an inventor, like
right.
Like Nikola Tesla or something like that would be kind of cool.
All right. Well, this one's even tougher. So if you had a time machine and you could go to the future or you could go to the past, which way are you going and what year are you going to?
Yeah, so I actually was discussing this with a friend a few weeks back, and I would probably go to the late 70s or early 80s again and kind of relive that era. But I was born in 85, so I got a little taste of the 80s and mostly 90s. But I would love to relive the 80s as my teenage years and those pivotal years. Probably be pretty fun.
Awesome. Awesome. That was great. So now we'll get onto your background a little bit, kind of what makes you tick, those type of things. So you said you're from Missouri. Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, born and raised in Springfield, Missouri. Lived here most of my life. I lived in Rockford, Illinois for about 3 years, kind of early in my career. And after I got married to my wife, who I actually met in Springfield, she moved up with me for a little while in Rockford, but then we moved back to Springfield and been here for the last probably 12 to 15 years. So
that's awesome. How did growing up in Springfield, Missouri shape who you are today?
Yeah, I think, Springfield it's not a small town, but it's not large by any means either. And, in the Midwest, you kind of, my family was not, wealthy by any means. And so you kind of just grow up with this hard work mindset and get the job done and blue collar type environment. But there was a lot of pride in that. And so, a lot of young people in the Springfield area and probably in a lot of Midwest towns, as they get out of high school and into their college years, they want to leave the city and, get out and go to the big towns. And I kind of had a little bit of a taste of that. But I think it gave me an appreciation for just being scrappy, getting things done, figuring stuff out on my own, and not be afraid to ask others for help too. I mean, in the Midwest and in smaller cities, it's all about helping others and, helping your neighbor and all of that. So I think I learned a lot of that growing up.
What chose you to focus on hospitality?
Yeah, a lot of people grew up in hospitality. I found having conversation with people in the industry, and then there's others that kind of it fell into their lap, or they just kind of accidentally fell into it. And that I am definitely the latter. Early in my career, a lot of it was focused just on e-commerce and mobile iOS development. And I was a user experience designer for several years. I transitioned out of a role that I was working for an agency in New York remotely as a creative director and designer, and had an opportunity to join Dustin as a partner at Longitude in that transition. And he had already kind of started moving Longitude in the direction of hospitality and restaurants and hotels. And so that was about 5 years ago. And I just dove headfirst like I always do when I'm learning something new, and read a ton of books, met a lot of people, listened to a lot of podcasts. So that's really where I started in hospitality, was 5 years ago when I joined as a partner at Longitude and kind of pivoted my career.
Well, great to hear. That was a great segue. Now we're going to kind of talk about your experience, and we'll start out with Longitude here. So this was, kind of your first time in the hospitality space. You've done design and branding before, but how did your past roles help you, with your strategies that went into joining Longitude?
That's a great question. A lot of user experience design is centered around understanding your customer, understanding their behaviors, understanding what's going to resonate with them, where to place buttons, how to, look at hierarchy of text on a web page and all these types of things. And through that, I was also doing a lot of, information architecture of understanding the sitemap and layout of a whole website or an app, and also doing a lot of branding. My background is in design and branding as well. So doing all of that early on and transitioning into hospitality, it wasn't as hard of a transition as you might think, because it's taking it from all of that thinking that you're going to do for a customer in a digital space, and now you're relaying that into a physical realm. Studying how the design of a space is going to function, how these different touch points along the guest journey. A lot of the same language is actually used between the digital and the physical space. It's just kind of repurposing it and rethinking, the processes we're going through in Longitude of how, we want the brand and these different touch points to really just impact the guest journey and the overall brand that you're building, the reputation you're building as a business.
So you co-founded Flyover, which is a hospitality investment and development group. So tell us a little bit more about that, and how did that get started? Yeah,
so Dustin and I, over the first several years of working together, we started just growing a love for hospitality, the people, the places. We had, such a immense privilege to like visit a lot of really great resorts and hotels all over the nation. But what we were finding is there wasn't a lot of that in the Midwest, especially kind of in the Ozarks. And that's where we live. So we just started thinking to ourselves, we're working with all these great clients. We're doing all these great projects and amazing brands. And why doesn't the Ozarks have any of this? So I ended up getting my real estate license a couple years back just because I wanted to learn more about real estate. I wasn't super familiar with it. And in doing so, I started looking for deals, looking for properties that were for sale, and stumbled upon this one in Branson, Missouri, which is about 45 minutes south of us in a heavy tourist market, and started having conversations with the broker and the seller, and ended up getting it under contract and had a 90 days due diligence period to figure it out. And that's when we kind of started the flyover developments. And really the Ozarker Lodge was our first, development and investment. And that's pretty much coincided with the launch of flyover developments.
You just mentioned, but you helped spearhead the repositioning, design, renovation of the Ozarker Lodge. Tell us a little more in depth about that project and what's going on there.
Yeah, it's been a project that's coming up on about 2 years since I first found the property to where we're at today. And, there's a lot of lessons learned. I always tell people it's almost like taking a master's class in hotel real estate development, investment, and all that. And because the partners involved in that were so great, we partnered with Eagle Point Hotel Partners, which is Stephen Chan and Eric Warner. You guys probably know them from ILC as well. And, they were just so incredibly awesome to work with. I can't say it enough. And without them involved, this project wouldn't have happened because, Dustin and I knew what we knew and we knew what we don't know. And it was all about, putting the right people in place with the right positions, the right knowledge, the right expertise and background. And we are huge proponents at Longitude of not trying to be experts in everything. And we try to do what we do and do it really well. And so the Ozarker Lodge was really kind of founded in that as well through the nature of who we are and what we do. We brought in a great design group, partnered with them. We out of Detroit called Perini. They actually did all the design direction and all of that. We provided them direction and the concept and the vision, and they kind of took it and ran with it. And they were really great to work with. We had a great general contractor who was very gracious with us. I'm sure we were probably a bad client, but they really knocked it out of the park. And, over the last 18 months, it was full on development. We opened in July, right around July 4th, and with a new product, new positioning, new brand. And since then we've, working out kinks here and there, learning the market still. Our operations team is doing great. We're getting a lot of great reviews and feedback from guests. And, we're still really excited about what the future holds for the Ozarker.
That's awesome. And you're also, as we said earlier, a published author as well. You've written 2 books in the hospitality space. Your first one was in 2020. You wrote Future Hospitality, which talks it's intersecting your brand background and your hospitality, but it talks about how that brand experience is going to drive not only a better guest experience, but a more inspired staff and also a little bit more with sustainable growth as well. Can you expand on that book, kind of what it talks about and what inspired you to go write it?
Yeah, and I'll correct you first. It was self-published, so I'm not like,
okay.
I'm not that good of an author, but yeah. So we self-published Future Hospitality through Longitude in, I think it was 2020. Perfect timing, starting right off with COVID. So that was both a blessing and a curse, I guess, in hindsight. But yeah, that book is really a peek behind the scenes of Longitude and our methodology, our approach, our almost manifesto of like why we do what we do, why branding is so important, how we think about branding, and how we believe hoteliers and hospitality brands need to start thinking about branding. It's not just a logo, it's not just a color, it's not just a name. It's really all encompassing it, and it should impact everything in your marketing, in your operations, and how you hire, how you attract talent, PR, crisis management, everything and anything you can think of related to hotels is impacted by branding. And it's all about building the reputation that you want and making a plan for doing that. And that's what we try to focus in on at Longitude. And so that's what that book is about, and how to, basically how branding bridges the gap between all the brainstorming you go through early on to how it is ultimately executed, on the property. So
Yeah. And it just looks like an awesome coffee table book as well. I've been looking for a great coffee table, and it has a cool cover. It just looks awesome. So, and most recently, you wrote Indie Hotel, which came out actually when we're recording this week. You're talking about why hoteliers are breaking free from chains and choosing more of an independent experience. And it was actually forwarded by our good friend, Andrew Benioff. But we haven't had a chance to read this one yet. What can we expect from your new book?
yeah, I love to explain it as kind of equal parts. I call it like a love letter to indie hotels and kind of the mindset of indie hotels and what that encompasses. Also, just kind of some practical thinking and things that we learned through the development of the Ozarker Lodge. I referenced that several times in the book. And then also, through conversations I've had in the past with people, and I invited other colleagues of mine in the hotel industry to contribute to this. So I asked them, for quotes and kind of snippets of thought that I could include in the book throughout that whole process. But again, it's all about, the conversations we're having with clients, even through Longitude and all the different decision-making we were making along the way with the Ozarker Lodge. You hear these conversations a lot of, should we go with the brand or should we go independent? And especially with the clients we're working with. And so what we found going through the Ozarker Lodge project, again, this was our first, but we did have those early discussions of the pros and cons of, do we want to do a soft brand or should we go full on independent? And it was kind of like weighing all of those pros. And in the book too, it's not like I'm not discouraging people from choosing a brand because there's definitely certain instances where that makes sense, but it's rather just trying to equip and make people that might otherwise default to a brand or think that's the only option in their market, maybe take a second look at the independent model and maybe gain some more confidence in moving forward with that. And ultimately, again, just promoting the indie mindset. And I just, I love the heart of hospitality when you dig down into it. And I think that's really important for any property, independent or branded.
I've got a random question. So growing up, I was a huge fan of Miami Vice, and I ended up going to FIU in Miami. And once I got to Miami, as I talked to people, they hated the TV show because it portrayed Miami as this drug killing. So with Ozark being an extremely popular TV show, how has that affected you? How has that come up in conversations about the destination? Because for a lot of us, especially I grew up in the Northeast, I didn't know what Ozark was or that area or that even existed. So how has that really impacted your property or the area as a whole?
Yeah. Well, I haven't actually seen the show, but more often than not, 9 times out of 10, when a new client or someone just not super familiar with us, I mentioned we live in the Ozarks, they always mention that. And I know a little bit, I know enough about it to understand what the, kind of the concept and place of it. But there's just like any place, any destination, there's some underlying truth to most stories like that. So there is a little bit of that, drugs and whatever in certain parts, but by and large, the Ozarks and the Branson area is just such beautiful scenery and such beautiful people. So many things to do for families and couples, and just a lot of people will call it the Branson market where the Ozarker is. They'll call it like Las Vegas without gambling, basically, because it's like you have the main strip there and there's all sorts of amusement and attractions. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of more laugh about it, and it's more of a laughing point. But hopefully it hasn't done any long-term damage, the show, to the Ozarks as a whole. But we're trying. That's kind of the goal of the Ozarker was to help create a new identity, a refreshed identity for the Ozarks and what it could represent. So hopefully we're going to be spearheading that over the next decade. That's our hope and our goal.
Awesome. So now we're going to move on more to the industry, your industry thoughts. So what are some of the biggest opportunities and challenges that you see for independent hotels? And if you want to talk about specifically kind of roadside hotels, feel free, but otherwise, up to you. Yeah.
With roadside hotels specifically, everyone talks about over the last 3 years since COVID, the resurgence of, the road trip. And you started to see a lot of the products like the Ozarker all over the nation. And because, people were getting pent up demand and desire to travel, but, airlines were off limits for a lot of people, or just not very friendly to a lot of travelers for a while. So I think you saw this resurgence of the Roadside Motel. But with that, even aside from, the COVID happenings, I think just that era of nostalgia and the memories that, this generation has of, I know me personally, I had a lot of great memories of just road trips with my family, good and bad, but it was just all part of, you look through to your past oftentimes through rose-colored glasses. And I think I do that quite a bit, but we were trying to capture a little bit of that with the Ozarker. And I think that's kind of what a lot of these properties are doing is, try to lean into that nostalgia, but in a modern way, with a modern twist, with modern amenities and programming and thoughtful connection to your community, to the neighborhood that you're in. And it just allows you a lot of freedom and flexibility to do that. And oftentimes that flexibility isn't always there when you're talking about brands or soft brands. You're kind of more limited on that. But with indie hotels and these roadside revitalizations, I think the sky's the limit, and it really just comes down to the owner and the team behind it and what they're capable of. And that's the thing that really excites me. And I think there's a big opportunity there.
That's great. So it's a great segue. So what are you doing, or what are you seeing as far as, the modern, the current traveler, the guest preference, this idea behind creating unique social spaces and amenities and just convenience for the guest? What are you seeing, or what are you doing that really kind of lends into that kind of current, thought process of the traveler?
I had a conversation with, you guys probably know him from Rob Blood from Lark Hotels, and he's a great independent hotelier up in the Northeast. And he mentioned a term that has resonated with me called unprescribed hospitality, meaning, you don't want to always just have like these buckets of hospitality and the way that you treat everybody. You want to really customize it to their experience and customize it to your market and understand your place and where you're at. And so with the Ozarker, for instance, we're trying, with Branson being such a family-friendly destination and just, people of multi-generations visiting there for many different reasons. It's a heavy leisure market. So we're trying to think of ways to help, attract those people with an offering that's new, that's unique, that's unexpected. We're trying to make sure that we're not forgetting even, parents who are traveling with kids. I think, we're trying to provide a lot of great amenities and thoughtful touches for that. For instance, at check-in, first of all, you're checking into this great, beautiful, it's almost like it is a fully functioning coffee shop called Storeroom. And so you check into this, you can grab a cup of coffee, but for your kids, if you have traveling with kids, they get a little bag of saltwater taffy. That's kind of a famous staple of the Branson area because of Silver Dollar City, which is a big amusement park there, and they sell saltwater taffy there. So we partnered with Silver Dollar City to offer little baggies of this to kids upon check-in, just to make it a little fun, special moment. We have a whole kids nook. We call it a kids activity nook or reading nook that has games, it has board games, books, all sorts of little things. And kids love that so much. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback about that. But just like little thoughtful things like that, we have a great team that's, just trying to think through all of these types of things. Another thing that we're trying to is on the programming side and kind of activation, we're launching this this monthly event called Mini Makers. And it's an event for parents and their children to come and explore kind of all things crafty and culinary. And so you're going to get to make a little treat like cupcakes or something, s'mores cupcakes, and then you're going to do a little craft and, just stuff like that. Like you can't, it's hard to brainstorm and just plan for that, but you got to try it and you got to see what resonates and really know your market and just try to be on brand with all of these types of initiatives.
No, that makes sense. Very smart. And so what do you think, maybe you can give some examples of what you're doing. What do you think that hotels, maybe, more specifically, obviously independent hotels, should be doing to create more brand awareness for their properties?
That's a really great question. And this is a challenge that we're even trying to still solve at the Ozarker is brand awareness, especially as a new product that is just only 90 days into it. I think one thing that's gone a very long way for us in getting awareness is brand alignment with other partners and collaborators. Very early on in our discussions, even before we broke ground, we started collaborating and having ideation sessions with other brands in the area. And, like obviously the tourism board, we got them, they're super excited about that. We're hosting a lot of their influencers at our property. Silver Dollar City, which is a main tourism driver for that area. We had early conversations with them, and we've done some great giveaways with them and collaborations, and several others. And so I think that goes a long way if you can really benefit your partners and collaborators in some way. And then also, obviously, you're benefiting and leveraging from their audience. And it helps kind of when you're aligned with your brand too, you're, hopefully in front of the similar audience you're trying to capture anyways. So I think that's one really special way. And it's fun too. It's fun to curate all those relationships and just have fun with it.
I love what you're doing. I would love to have my own independent hotel, kind of what you're talking about in Springfield, Missouri. Same way I love Wisconsin. So what is your advice to folks like me who have dreams of opening up their own independent hotel?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, Wisconsin, you guys got Wisconsin Dells up there, which is great. And
Door County.
Yep, Door County. Great. Like you guys have some amazing places up there. And I think it really takes, I've, and take it for what it's worth. This is my advice, and maybe not always the best approach, but I would say lean into what you know best. For us, we loved hospitality, but what we knew best was branding and design and visioning and concepting. And so then we had a lot of great relationships and cool just relationships in the area. And so we started with that. We built the concept around it. Right when we identified the property, Dustin and I started thinking, okay, what's the brand for this? What are we going to name it? What are some activation ideas? We started building a whole deck around this. And what that did for us was, that was our area of expertise. And when we started having early conversations with investors and lenders and other partners, like it was very easy for us to communicate the concept, the market, the opportunity, the vision for what we're building, and everybody quickly got it and got on board and got excited. Even lenders were super excited about it. And lending is a whole different challenge, and you could have a whole podcast about lending and indie hospitalities and the challenges there. But I think whatever your expertise and your background is, and kind of where you think you can add the most value in a deal, start there, and then start surrounding yourself with people who can fill in the gaps and do the other things well. And at some point, you are just going to have to just go for it. For us, that looked like, I mentioned this earlier, but we actually had two other partners involved in the Ozarker before the Eagle Point folks got involved. And they're great guys. They're great friends of mine. I still talk with them all the time, but they just had personal reasons they couldn't go forward with the deal. And it was like the last minute right before we had it, we're going to have it under contract, and they just bailed on us. We're like, oh gosh, like, what are we going to do? It was just me and Dustin looked at me and said, like, what are we going to do? And like, how are we going to do this? And I was like, I don't know, but we got to do it. So we signed the contract, 90-day due diligence, and figured it out. And the rest is history. So just takes that doing it sometimes.
That's awesome. All right. Brats, cheese curds, and Spotted Cow Hotel in Wisconsin. Let's go.
There you go. All right. Let's go.
So this was great. Thank you so much. That's our last question from us. Our producer, John, has been listening in the background this whole time. He's got one more question to wrap us up here.
Great.
First off, just want to say I respect your music choice. Those would be exactly the bands I would pick. So Dashboard and Third Eye Blind. That's why I'm playing in the car right now. My question is kind of, with roadside hotels, motels, is there any sort of perception you have to overcome or negative connotation that comes with taking something like that and then doing what you guys are doing with it?
Yeah. I mean, roadside motels historically, there was an era, back in like the 50s and 60s where roadside motels were very well regarded and taken care of. There's pride of ownership. And then, through like the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, it tanked pretty hard there for a while as a category of hotel. So I think when people hear the word motel, they might even have certain connotations that come with that. And so I think you have to almost overcome that with brand, with your story, with the narrative, with your design. You have to show people that in a very quick, short amount of time, just as you would on a landing page on a website, and you have like that split second to show someone exactly what you want to show them. It's kind of the same case for, any hotel, but especially motels. You're trying to combat negative perceptions that motels might have or bad experiences people might have had in the past. But the quicker you can do that, I think the better it'll work out for you. And, there's a lot of great, even like if you look at Bunkhouse Group, they have a lot of great motels that they've revitalized too. And I think they have a great kind of blueprint and way that they bring out the voice of an area, and just the concepts they're creating are so great. And I actually mentioned Bunkhouse and Indie Hotel as well, but I think there's lots of people doing this really well, and I think travelers are understanding this type of category a little bit better now. And there's even, like, you guys probably seen some of the shows, like with all the renovations, and they walk through how they did it, and I think it's becoming more and more familiar to folks. So.
Now, that's great. So that does it for another episode of The Modern Hotelier. Jeremy, it was great having you. This is the point in the show where you get to let people know how they can connect with you, how they can find out about the property. So plug away.
Awesome. Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Like I said, that's where I do most of my social media. The Ozarker Lodge, you can just check out theozarkerlodge.com or find us on Instagram, connect with us there. longitudebranding.com. And then Flyover is just flyoverdevelopments.com. And if you want to email me, Jeremy at longitudebranding.com. Happy to connect with anybody that wants to connect. So,
all right. So great. So again, that does it for another episode of The Modern Hotelier. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see everyone again soon.
This episode is sponsored by Longitude Branding. Are you opening a new hotel and needing a brand that really stands out? Longitude could be the branding and design partner you need. Since 2010, they've worked alongside many of the most iconic hotel brands and countless independent boutique hotels of all shapes and sizes. Whether you're constructing a new hotel from the ground up or renovating and repositioning an existing asset, Longitude is your guide for building a brand that lasts. From developing the vision and positioning strategy, to creating a brand name and identity, to designing interiors that wow guests, Longitude aims to help its clients create more memorable, engaging, and impactful guest experiences. Reach out with your next project by visiting longitudebranding.com.
You made it to the end of The Modern Hotelier. Thanks for listening. The Modern Hotelier is produced by Make More Media. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or follow wherever you get your podcasts. If you know of a guest or sponsor that would be a good fit, feel free to email us at hello@themodernhotelier.com. Thanks, and have a great day.